In Crusader Kings 3, you play not as a nation, but as a family, transitioning from different heads of your chosen family as you work your way through the Middle Ages. Because a CK3 game can last 600 years, you have to pass down your titles, gold, and fame to your next family head upon your character's death a good number of times, making succession one of, if not the most important aspects of the entire game. So in this video, I will be talking about all the different ways that I know of how to successfully deal with your family's succession. Before we get started, there are some special succession types available in the game for different regions like the Scandinavian elective, but for this video I will be focusing on the standard succession where land transfers from parent to child, and this is the most common type of succession you will see in this game. The way I look at succession in CK3, there are really 4 main ways of ensuring a successful passing of the baton after your character's death. I'll put these 4 ways on screen now, but it is important to note that to run a successful empire, you will have to use some combination of these, so that your heir will always inherit enough land and you can have a successful 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th life. I will be going into detail about each one of these ways with further tips on how to complete them as efficiently as possible. First, we will be talking about how the game wants you to deal with succession, and that is by changing the succession laws in your realm, so that only one child will inherit all of your land instead of having it split up into tiny pieces. Like I said, succession happens because you play as a family in Crusader Kings 3, and even in the turbulent Middle Ages, there were laws that existed that would dictate how people would divide up their belongings upon their deaths. These laws can be seen in the Succession tab under the Realm menu. At any time in the game, you can go and see what would happen if your character were to suddenly drop dead.
Opportunity for proper engagement is actually after the tabling of the...
If you only have one male child and your religion/culture doesn't allow for women to receive land, then you would see that your son and heir would be set to inherit every one of your titles. But if you have more than one eligible heir, then you will see this message, which means that the next character that you will be playing as will not own all of the titles that your current character does. Some will be transferred to your brothers and or sisters on your character's death. This happens because when you start a CK3 game, your succession type will be set to Confederate partition, which you can see means that your titles will be split up evenly to all your eligible heirs on your character's death, and any titles that haven't been created yet will be formed and distributed to your younger heirs. This just means that if you own enough land to make a duchy, kingdom, or empire, but don't have enough gold to do so, when you die, this title will get created and given out to one of your secondary heirs. Each jump in the succession laws makes it so that your land will divide up less and less on your character's death, until you get to the single realm heir succession laws, where only one person from your family tree will inherit all of your titles, and you will no longer have to worry about splitting up your lovely land on death. Once you have researched the required tech, changing your succession law is quite simple. In the Succession tab, you can click on Change next to your current law, and as long as you have limited crown authority, the backing of your powerful vassals, and a little bit of prestige, you can change your succession laws at will. However, the bottleneck in this method is the time it takes to research the texts that unlock these new succession laws, with the single heir laws only being unlocked by primogeniture, which is a late medieval era tech. It is for this reason that getting to a single heir succession will take you most of the game, so we will have to take advantage of all kinds of tricks to limit our heirs and disinherit other ones so that we can pass most of our titles to our next playable character. So now that we know that when we die, our land will be divided up and given to all of our eligible heirs for most of the game, we can work on limiting the number of eligible heirs that we have. And the first way I suggest doing this is nothing complicated. It is by having less kids. Becoming celibate is probably the best way to have less children in CK3. The celibacy perk is available in the learning tree, and luckily only has one perk above it in the tree order. After taking this perk, you will have the decision to embrace celibacy, which will give your character the celibate trait. This lovely trait brings your character's fertility down to 0%, while also giving you a piety bonus of +1 per month, which is not too bad at all. This decision is also toggleable, meaning that if something happens to one of your heirs, you could always stop being celibate and start cranking out the kids again. But what if you don't have time to go down the learning tree and pick up the celibate perk? Well, in that case, you can always search for an older wife who will be less likely to have kids after a few good childbearing years. You won't want to go too old because you'll probably need at least 1 or 2 heirs first. But choosing someone too young will also have the negative effect of having too many kids. This method isn't as clean as adopting celibacy because there isn't really a guarantee on when you'll stop having kids. I've had games where my wife was still pumping out little ones at the age of 45. Having less kids is great, but sometimes we are very focused on war or economic growth in the early game and don't have the time to move up the learning tree and pick up the celibacy perk. And also sometimes we want to be breeding a race of superhumans, so picking up an old wife that might not have those perfect inheritable traits is not really possible. In this case, you will unfortunately be pumping out tons of heirs, and you'll need to find a way to get rid of some of them so that your land won't break up into a million little pieces on succession. Luckily for you, this is my expertise and I have plenty of ways that you can get this done, so I will be highlighting them quickly now. One quick and easy way to remove your children from your family line is the Disinherit option. You can find this under Hostile when you click on one of your heirs, and it will cost you some of your players' prestige and some of your family's renown. I have been criticized in the past about using this option because renown is a pretty valuable resource to upgrade your dynastic legacies, but I think that if you use the Disinherit option like a last resort for getting rid of some of your kids, it can be pretty valuable. Also, if you disinherit while your child is young, it will be a lot cheaper than when they get old and powerful. So don't wait too long to decide which kid will be your primary heir. If you're playing as a Catholic ruler, then there's an option available for you to send your sons to the clergy to become monks. This option is hard to pull off if the child is a direct heir with counties already owed to them, because that will provide a negative modifier to the chance that they will accept when asking to take vows. But there are some things that can counter this negative penalty. Giving your child a learning education will add a +50 modifier to this decision. Increasing that child's opinion of your character will also increase the success chance. And if your character has lots of dread, or if your child has the craven trait, they will also be more likely to accept. All that being said, getting a child to take vows is difficult, but will save you on prestige and renown if you can get it done. You should always at least check if your child is close to acceptance from a young age, and then you can make some changes during their development to make it so they are more likely to agree when they become an adult. If you have founded a holy order in the game, you gain the additional option to send your child to this holy order as a religious knight. To do this, you just need to make sure that your child has a martial education, and then the option will become available. Just like taking vows, this is highly dependent on your child's traits, so if they are zealous or a craven, they would be more likely to accept. But again, this is just another way that you should always look out for if you're trying to reduce your number of heirs. Finally, if you've ever been stuck in a situation where you have a lot of heirs and were feeling particularly evil that day, you might have tried to run a murder scheme on your children only to see this message that says you can't because they are your child. Now this is pretty disappointing, but by chance, if your character has the sadistic trait, you then do have the option to murder your own kids, and this can be a great way of getting rid of some of those less appealing heirs. Now, I'm sure there are other ways you can do this depending on your culture, but I have just had less experience dealing with some of the Far Eastern cultures in this game, so I can't say for certain, but I would think they would work in a similar way to making your kid a monk if you're playing as a Catholic ruler. And for the final way that you can deal with succession, sometimes it is best to not do anything at all, and let your eligible heirs inherit their rightful land and deal with things as they come. Back in the Middle Ages, the real rulers weren't cheesing the system like most of us when we play a CK3 game. And this is a big reason why so many kingdoms were constantly falling apart during this time period. After a great ruler dies, having his sons duke it out for control is a natural part of history. And sometimes this is the most fun way to play Crusader Kings 3. From my experience, the player heir will always become the best of the eligible heirs, meaning that you'll have the best chance as the player to kill off any of your siblings who got your parents' land and reform your realm. You also automatically get a claim on any land that your parent owned. But don't feel bad about using the cheesy mechanics I talked about above, because I know how frustrating it can be to put plenty of time and gold into certain counties only to have them go to a brother of yours when your parent character dies. But if you do want to take a more realistic roleplay route to your next CK3 game, I actually have a tip about this too. Like I mentioned during the Confederate Partition section, titles would get created if you own the land in the region but haven't spent the gold to make the title. So, if you do have a few heirs lined up, ready to inherit your titles, you can always make sure to create the next highest level of title before you die. During succession, there are two really bad things that can happen. One, you lose some of your counties, but your realm stays together with your new player heir as its ruler. Or two, you lose some of your counties, and your realm fractions off into multiple duchies, kingdoms, or empires. Obviously, outcome number one is better, as even though you lost some of your counties, which are the main source of income and manpower, your brothers' or sisters' lands will still be a part of your realm, and therefore you will get tax and levies from them. So to stop your siblings from leaving your realm, you need to make sure that in your whole realm, you only have one copy of the highest ranked title. As an example, if I am playing as the highly volatile Umayyad kingdom, you can see that on succession my land will still split up into 3 different kingdoms, even though I only own one kingdom myself. And this is because this land is operating under a Confederate partition, which means that new titles will be created and given to my younger heirs. And if we take a look at the kingdom tiles, you can see that we own enough of Valencia for it to be created on my character's death, and enough of this kingdom here so it will also be created. So if I were to continue playing this game and I didn't want to cheese the system by disinheriting a few of my sons, then what I would probably have to do is get enough power to create the Empire of Hispania, which only requires me to take about 9 counties and create one of the 3 kingdoms that I'm currently owning. If I were to create the Empire of Hispania, then on succession, I would still lose some of the counties that I own, but all of my sons would be part of that empire because my player heir would inherit the highest level title that I own, which would now be an empire, and I wouldn't have enough land to own any other empires that are around me, so none of them would get created on my death and given to any of my younger sons. Succession is a complicated part of CK3, but ensuring a successful transition from player to heir can be really helpful in your realm's ability to snowball, getting more and more power. So I really hope that you guys will find this information helpful and you'll be able to use it in your CK3 games. I am as sure there are other ways to deal with succession as I am that you guys will let me know about them in the comments after I post this video. I'm just kidding, of course. I always really enjoy reading about the things that I miss in these tutorial videos, and the more tips that we learn as a group, the better we'll be at CK3. So honestly, if I did miss some ways to deal with succession, please do let me know. And if you did learn something from this video, think about subscribing to the channel. We have a lovely little community here with some really great and thoughtful conversations. Alright, that's it for me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!